Hello and welcome to the Quick Time Out with Sean Carroll. My name's Sean Carroll and this is the Quick Time Out. I thought I'd just jump on a quick little news pod today, as there's going to be no episode of the Deep Dive NBA podcast this week, but there's still quite a bit of news to run through. So I'll just run through some of the headlines for the past month. I think I've got up to here, and just sort of give my thoughts on what's been happening in the news and why I think it's happening, and so on and so forth. So the first, most recent piece of news we have on the 16th of September is from Jonathan Fagan of the Houston Chronicle, saying that Jalen Green prefers to extend with the Houston Rockets rather than any other team. So he writes in the article that the Rockets may choose to let Jalen Green or another player who's extension eligible, Alperen Sengun, hit restricted free agency instead of signing them to extensions. This would let the Houston Rockets be players in free agency in the summer of 2025, or by not extending them now, they have the flexibility to make a trade like a Kevin Durant. They've also been rumored to throw their hat in the ring with a young star who might become available, like Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, Zion Williamson, and so on. So this little piece of news from Jalen Green, from his point of view, from his agent's point of view, it's probably very much like, oh, okay, let's just try and get our money as quick as possible, because Jalen Green hasn't proved that he's a maximum player so far throughout his career. He hasn't really proved that he's really worthy of like a big financial commitment. I'm sure if he does hit restricted free agency, I'm sure there's plenty of teams with cap space, maybe the Spurs, maybe the Hornets, maybe the Pistons. One of those teams I'm sure would offer him just a little bit of money, or quite a bit of money. But the most money he could get is by showing out in a Houston Rockets uniform and saying, hey, look, I am a top 2, top 3 option on this team moving forwards, give me my money. But yeah, he just hasn't proven that as of yet. So it's probably a little bit stressful if you're Jalen Green, where you're looking at the Houston Rockets, you're looking at his team who want to keep flexibility into next offseason. He's not really forcing their hand with his play to go out there and get a lot of money and ask for that financial commitment. So yeah, this report is, I'm sure, 100% true, saying that he prefers to extend with the Houston Rockets. But if I had to put money on it, I would say that there is very much close to 0% chance that Jalen Green is going to extend with the Houston Rockets, I think, before the season or even throughout the season. I mean, what would he have to do at the start of this upcoming season to secure himself an extension? Like averaging 30 points a game? It's a tall task, because if the absolute worst case scenario happens for the Houston Rockets, let's say he does average 30 points a game on 70% shooting, then they're just going to say, sweet, like, we've got this guy who's going to be a restricted free agent at the end of the year. He's probably not going to take the qualifying off. He probably wants life-changing money. Let's take it into restricted free agency, maybe have a spend, maybe make a trade, and then just re-sign our guy afterwards, just like we saw the Philadelphia 76ers do with Tyrese Maxey and his restricted free agency, where they were able to enter with their player who's still in the rookie deal. Yes, Jalen Green will have a higher cap hold because he was the second overall pick, but still a lot more flexibility to be able to go out and do things and then sign your restricted free agent. The next piece of news here, 15th of September, saying that the sale of the Boston Celtics is reportedly due to increasing salary and tax concerns, according to Josh Cosman, Brian Lewis of the New York Post. So Irving Grasbeck, wow, of course I'm going to forget how to say Grasbeck, who owns a controlling interest in the Boston Celtics at about 20%, while Wyc Grousbeck, the franchise's governor, owns about 3% of the franchise, have been apparently butting heads. Maybe that's the wrong term, but they've got a difference of opinions about what to do with the Boston Celtics. Now, they are on the market, and it is reported that they are up for sale. There was a report yesterday, and I'm recording this today on the 19th of September in Australian time. So there was a report yesterday about NBA expansion, saying that they're going to focus on expansion once the sale of the Celtics goes through. But this report says that the Boston Celtics barely broke even during the 2023-24 season, and that was obviously the season that they won the NBA championship, and everything's just going to get a lot more expensive. The Celtics went out and they extended and re-signed every single one of their guys, even down to the Sam Hauses of the world, which, once you get to Sam Hauser, he's definitely a depth piece that helps, and he played in the NBA Finals. But that's, his tax dollars, they're now entering the repeater tax. Every dollar over that they're paying over, including Sam Hauser's money, just represents millions and millions and millions more in tax payments. So I don't know how much I believe this report that they broke even during the 23-24 season. Like there's definitely some ways to fluff around that. I think like all these NBA teams just make like money hand over fist. Like it's just a money printing machine, unless you do get into the repeater tax where it's like, you know, if you're not the KD Steph Warriors, where it's like, okay, well maybe this is a little bit hard to continue. But the Celtics haven't been in the tax for that long. They are now just about to kick into the repeater tax. So yeah, maybe it's sort of saving face for the Grauspecks. Maybe it's not. Maybe they do actually have financial concerns. But I just wonder what barely broke even means. Does that mean they barely broke even, but they were, because we're dealing with a lot of money, were they $50 million over the top? Or were they, as opposed to some other teams where it's like, oh, they might be $200 million over the top. So I wonder what that actually means. But this is the report that we're getting told. This was also from the New York Post. Just one thing to mention, that it's not the local media. It's not the local guys that are reporting this. Moving on to the next piece of news, on the 13th of September, the Golden State Warriors have interest in Jimmy Butler, according to Sam Amick of The Athletic. Quote here, Jimmy Butler is going to be a free agent next summer, as he didn't get an extension done. And the Warriors have interest there and probably made a couple of calls this summer, end quote. This is interesting because Jimmy Butler is someone who was definitely available. It doesn't seem as though the Miami Heat want to trade him, and that would explain why he didn't get an extension or didn't get a trade when he requested one just shortly after July. And it looks, look, Jimmy Butler's going to be a free agent next summer. And Jimmy Butler's also going to be, Jamie, pull that up. Jimmy Butler age. Jimmy Butler will be 36 by the time the season's done. So it's like, you know, you're going to go in, Steph Curry's going to be 37, 38, Draymond also over the age of 35. You're going to go into free agency, somehow clear enough cap space, or maybe Jimmy Butler's going to take a discount so you can sign a 36-year-old. Questionable. So I don't know, this is coming from Sam Amick, who's usually a national newsbreaker, so it's not like there's got a specific Golden State Warriors source here, but then it's also not from a Miami guy. But maybe it's just trying to buff up Jimmy's status. There was also a report a week prior saying that Jimmy is, quote, likes Brooklyn, according to Brian Lewis of the New York Post. So Jimmy and his agent are definitely getting Jimmy's name out in the news, saying, hey, there's some teams out there that are options. I don't know. I mean, obviously Brooklyn has more cap space than they know what to do with, so Brooklyn could throw Jimmy's max at him if they so choose. It would be a horrible decision, but it's definitely a choice. So maybe it's just Jimmy's agent getting out there and saying, hey, like, there's teams out here that are interested in us. I'm sure the Nets would at least say, hey, we'll give you maybe the full mid-level, and then we can trade you 6 months later just to get some more money out of Miami. Just very, very confusing.
You want to talk WNBA? Maybe some WNBL? Australian Opals chat? Heck, even dabble in some EuroLeague? Find the W Basketball Show on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.
Next piece of news, Golden State Warriors are currently unwilling to offer Jonathan Kuminga a contract near his max. Coming from Anthony Slater of The Athletic, it says here that the two sides have had tentative extension talks, but there's a clear divide on his value. Now, this is obviously because Jonathan Kuminga would be going into that conversation, hey, give me my max. And that max wouldn't be like the All-NBA max, but it would be a max like, hey, trust that I will become an All-NBA guy in the future. And the Golden State Warriors say, no, we're going to pinch pennies and we're going to try and save as much money as possible, because just going off that Boston Celtics chat before, the Golden State Warriors could very well enter that discussion where they are pinching pennies if this all goes bottom up and they miss the playoffs. Now, I don't want to excuse my favorite basketball team, the Golden State Warriors, while not excusing... Nice, drop a pen. Well, not excusing, the best team in basketball right now, the Boston Celtics, but if I was the GM, I wouldn't give Jonathan Kuminga the max right now. Similar to the Jalen Green news, it's like sort of go out there and prove it a little bit. We've seen Jonathan Kuminga play incredibly, especially down the second half of last season, once Steve Kerr actually realized that he could play basketball. Also, let's just think back to that game where Nikola Jokic beat the Golden State Warriors on a buzzer beater in Golden State. Obviously, the playoff seedings were a lot more tight then, and we being the Golden State Warriors, wanted to hopefully avoid the play-in. That was one of those buzzer-beating losses that we had that really pushed us down into the play-in. But there was a stark contrast in that game where The Denver Nuggets were trusting all their young guys. Now they've got their own financial problems that they're probably wanting to trust their young guys more than another team. But the Golden State Warriors didn't trust their young guys, and Jonathan Kuminga rode the bench after scoring like 10 straight points or something in that game. Eventually, Steve Kerr was like, okay, I need to play the guy after he like softly requested a trade. And I think for like the month of March, I think you can Google every Jonathan Kuminga March numbers and it's going to look incredible. But for the month of March, he averaged over 20 points, was incredible. Down the end of the year, it did seem a little bit that teams had sort of figured him out and were sort of saying, hey, like, maybe try shoot that jumper that you keep pump faking. And his numbers did fall off a little bit. But if you're the Warriors, like, I think it's fully defensible for them to be like, no, we're not going to give you a max. We're not just going to give you a contract that not even that you don't trust the guy. That could just be a bad contract. If Jonathan Kuminga's development stalls, then all of a sudden you just don't have like a superstar All NBA player to go alongside Steph Curry. All of a sudden you've got a sub All-Star guy getting paid close to max money, while you've got $100 million in the whole life of Andrew Wiggins' contract sitting there. You've obviously got a max for Steph. He's making $60 million a year. Draymond on that 4 for 100 as well. So I think we could be having this discussion 12 months from now where Jonathan Kuminga is a max contract player. I think that's definitely like a viable outcome. And the Warriors, I'm sure, would say, hey, here's the max, sign it, and then be on this team for the next 5 years and for the twilight of Steph's career. That's fine. Just sort of go out there and prove it, which is sort of what it comes down to if you're a restricted free agent and you haven't really proven that you can be an All-NBA / All-Star level player, unless your name is Franz Wagner. Next piece of news on the 9th of September, saying that the Brooklyn Nets have a high asking price for Cam Johnson, according to Brian Lewis of the New York Post. The Nets are expected to consider trades for the veterans of the roster, including the aforementioned Cam Johnson, veteran. He was just drafted, wasn't he? No, he's actually close to 30. Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, and Bojan Bogdanovic, the latter who was acquired in the Mikal Bridges deal. Not too much to take from this piece of news other than why are they asking a lot for Cam Johnson? If I were the Brooklyn Nets and anyone came to offer anything for Cam Johnson, not that I think he's a bad player, I think he's getting paid a lot of money. So I'll just like more cap flexibility, or maybe the Nets are keeping a high asking price for Cam Johnson because if a superstar does become available, all of a sudden they have this inflated salary that they can move for Cam Johnson. Or the most likely outcome is they're just sort of playing the game a little bit, and I'm sure they would trade Cam Johnson for some middling first round pick as soon as possible, but you may as well just wait 6 months, see if you can turn that into a pick and a half or 2 picks if Cam Johnson really does play. Next piece of news, 5th of September 2024, Michael Malone and the Denver Nuggets front office are reportedly, quote, not seeing eye to eye, unquote, according to Zach Lowe of ESPN. The Nuggets lost KCP and didn't bring in an external replacement whatsoever, and it's just assumed that Christian Braun/Brown will be taking his spot at shooting guard, which I think is quite fair. Kelvin Booth obviously has prioritized development in the past couple of years for the Denver Nuggets as they look to, I think the quote in that Ringer article 12 months ago, as they look to build a sustainable contender. There was also a few quotes about Bones Highland's work ethic, which is actually crazy to think where the world was on Bones Highland 12 months ago. For those playing at home and unsure, he actually plays for the Clippers right now, and there's a chance he might miss their roster. But yeah, apparently Michael Malone is upset at how the Nuggets are sacrificing short-term success for this sort of long-term question marks. It's like, will guys like Julian Strawther or Peyton Watson really turn out to be like capable rotation level players? I think Peyton Watson's close there now, but out of all the guys they've drafted, Peyton Watson might be the only guy. You have to include Christian Braun into that as well. So there's a lot of questions, and maybe the negative take here is that Michael Malone wants to get out before this all falls to shit, because Nikola Jokic is 29, Jamal Murray, who just signed an extension, is in his late 20s as well. But if you can't really put a contender around this team, and Michael Malone famously runs very short rotations, if you can't put a contending team around these guys, Michael Malone will be the first name that they turn to, because you can't just turn to the veterans that are no longer there. And especially if this team keeps pinching pennies, like what if Aaron Gordon leaves in free agency because they're like, oh, just like KCP, we'll find another replacement. Yeah, Peyton Watson's good, but like he's nowhere near as good as Aaron Gordon, just as like KCP. Yeah, his numbers in the playoffs didn't look great, but it's better to have KCP and pay a little bit more tax than to just say, hey, Christian Braun, you're now the starting two. But then, okay, well, who's backing him up? I also lost Reggie Jackson in a salary dump as well. Not that I think he could take that place, but maybe Michael Malone's getting out on this, because if they do lose in the playoffs this year, the only thing that they can change, because they've lost so many players, is maybe we'll just get a different look at a coach. And I think it's much better to find a new job when you've left your last job, as opposed to being fired from your last job for underperforming in the playoffs. So maybe Michael Malone's looking at this going, well, I'm the next scapegoat, because the scapegoats are quickly leaving in free agency, and he just doesn't have that sort of, what's the word? Doesn't have that, well, I guess the same excuse. As with all former Denver Nuggets and, presumptive former Denver Nuggets, you always look to the Minnesota Timberwolves to see if Tim Connolly can rehire them. But Chris Finch looks quite solidified in his role as head coach there. Was the second most winning all-time Minnesota Timberwolves coach, Chris Finch. So, yeah, if your favorite basketball team is about to be out of a coach, needing a good head coach, maybe wait 9 months and Michael Malone might be available. And final piece of news, this came out on the 3rd of September 2024. It says that Trae Young has no, quote, real market, unquote, for a trade, according to Tim McMahon of ESPN. It gets into a quote here. It says, if there was a real market for Trae Young, he'd be somewhere else right now, unquote. The report also says that the Utah Jazz actually sniffed around for a trade scenario, including Trae Young. And he's also been rumored to the Spurs, but it didn't actually say there was any concrete sort of figure going back and forth there with Trae Young and the Spurs. So while this isn't really much of a report, the thing that I was really interested in is the Utah Jazz, because the Utah Jazz have 1 million picks coming their way. They might not be that good, but they've got 1 million picks coming from the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Cleveland Cavaliers, obviously their own picks. But other than that, they've just got a bunch of mid-draft guys who might be very good, but also might just be role players on a contending team. So yeah, Danny Ainge, obviously when Danny Ainge took over as the lead decision maker in Utah, everyone looked at his previous stops where he's been able to bring guys in and sort of have a solid core and then just trade for a player like Paul Pierce or like Kyrie Irving and just bring an established star in to a nucleus. Is Trae Young that next guy? I don't know, but that sounds very interesting, and I'm going to give it a spin on 2K to see how it plays out. But I don't know if that's the answer, but it is one just little thing to put a pin in, where it's like, we have this piece of data where the Utah Jazz have sort of tied their name to one person, that being Trae Young, very loosely. But is that Danny Ainge's move? Just food for thought and something to look out for in the next 24 months. So happy thinking about that. But yes, that will be all for this episode of the Quick Time Out with Sean Carroll. Thank you for listening very much. If you liked the episode, let me know. If there's something you think I could do better, let me know. In the meantime, we've got plenty of other podcasts going up on the Deep 2 Podcast Network. Plenty of stuff going on the socials. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your socials/podcasts, and make it a great day.
The Jeff Van Gundy Tribute Show is your fortnightly dose of the lighter side of basketball, hosted by me, Marco.
And me, Lucas. We take a more laid-back approach, talking about the NBA, the WNBA, FIBA basketball, culture, whatever tickles our fancy or grinds our gears.
The show is filled with great guests, classic gags, and a healthy dose of tangents in honor of the great man himself.
The Jeff Van Gundy Tribute Show, fortnightly on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.
Loves just talking about the league, certain things like that.